But the climate change hysteria remains. No problem arguing the case. Indeed, I would say from the beginning there has been little debate. The global warming mafia demands that you agree, and if you don't, you'll be vilified, crucified, condemned and silenced. But as you've heard me say, if carbon dioxide is the problem, and it's 0.04% of the atmosphere, you'd have to be an intellectual cripple to believe that was causing any trouble at all. But be that as it may, from where I sit, I see the global warming apologists getting very desperate. It hasn't worked out as they wanted it to. Remember that fake Tim Flannery, Australian of the Year in 2007, because he said it would never rain again. Hello? And kids would never see snow again. Well, we're flooded here and in Britain, and they're dying from snowslides in Kabul. Must be global warming. But I thought the bushfires were global warming. By the way, my toaster didn't work this morning. Must be global warming. And the dog has fleas. That must be global warming too. You see, the more desperate you get, the more you have to resort to fiddling with the truth. Craig Kelly, the very good federal Liberal MP for the seat of Hughes, sought to speak in Parliament last week about a very important issue. The long-established record of the world's longest heatwave, I might add. He was prevented from speaking. I wonder why. The record's held by Marble Bar in outback WA for 160 days between October 31, 1923 and April 7, 1924. Do you get the drift? This was long before all this talk about global warming and coal mines and carbon dioxide. The world's longest heatwave, October 1923 to April 1924. It couldn't have been global warming. Maximum daily temperatures above 100 degrees Fahrenheit or 38.7 degrees centigrade. Well, Craig Kelly tried to make this very valid point that the Bureau of Meteorology has now adjusted these historic records. And in that adjustment, the past has been cooled. So historic temperatures, surely this is a serious issue, but don't expect anyone in the media to address it. Historic temperature records have been doctored. The Bureau of Meteorology has reassessed the temperature on March 8, 1924, and has deemed it wasn't 38.2 degrees centigrade as officially recorded at Marble Bar. No, they've worked out 94 years later it wasn't that hot. And they've adjusted the original data down by 1.7 degrees centigrade to 36.5 on the old scale. Do you get the drift? Not 100 degrees Fahrenheit, but 97.7 Fahrenheit. Why? Well, of course, those Marble Bar temperatures don't suit the agenda that the temperatures today are the hottest ever because of carbon dioxide. So adjust the Marble Bar temperature down and hope no one notices. This alteration reduces the length of the heat wave, that is, the days above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, down from 160 to 128. So the record is no longer held by Marble Bar. Why would the Bureau of Meteorology adjust the data? This is not the first time they've done it. They've cooled the past before. They've altered the historical record before. We don't have time to go into all of that tonight. Didn't George Orwell write in 1984, and I quote, "Day by day and almost minute by minute, the past was brought up to date. In this way, every prediction made by the party could be shown by documentary evidence to have been correct, nor was any item of news or any expression of opinion which conflicted with the needs of the moment ever allowed to remain on the record. All history was palimpsest." Palimpsest is a word which suggests that what was the past has been altered by later writing superimposed on the past. In other words, something's been altered today from what it was yesterday. So our heat records of the past have all been, quote, brought up to date by the Bureau of Meteorology. Perhaps they conflict with the theory of global warming because with low carbon dioxide, as you can imagine, way back in 1923, the theory says it couldn't have been that hot back then. There was no heavy industrialisation as we have today. Well, Craig Kelly tried to make all these points in the Parliament last week and he was stopped from speaking. But Graham and I allow him to speak here and he joins us from Canberra. Craig, what's going on? This has been happened before, again and again and again. The Bureau of Meteorology are doing the bidding of the government, but no one seems to stop them. What's happened now?
Well, firstly, what you just set out and explained there, people would think, that's unbelievable, that can't possibly happen. But that is exactly what has happened. And I remember being at school, Alan, and learning about that world record heat wave at Marble Bar. And it gave me a great appreciation for the pioneers, how tough they would have done it. Imagine living through 160 days in a row, back in the 1920s, out in the outback of Western Australia, no air conditioning, no refrigeration. They were the pioneers that built this country, and that gave me a great appreciation for them. But yet for the Bureau of Meteorology to go back into the past and to change those temperature records and to take that historic record away from Marble Bar, where it now goes to Death Valley in the USA for a run of 154 days they had in 2001, it's actually rewriting our history. And that's, Alan, what I object to. I just think that's appalling.
Well, when I heard you were trying to make that speech, I went back through my correspondence, and I remember in 2018, a listener wrote to me about extraordinarily hot temperatures, 48 degrees Celsius, recorded by his father over 15 days in 1939 around Quirindi, which is on the northwest slopes of New South Wales. Now, there would have been very little carbon dioxide emissions at Quirindi in 1939. So my listener thought, well, I'll visit the Quirindi post office and see if I can see the official records of the event. No such records existed. And the listener said the records had been homogenised, that is, scaled down by the Bureau of Meteorology to make it look as though temperatures were cooler 80 years ago. This is not an isolated instance, this Marble Bar thing, is it?
Alan, this has happened to every temperature station around the nation. And also, one of the first things when Tony Abbott was elected as Prime Minister, he started an inquiry into the Bureau's changes. They made some changes back in 2011 where they cooled all the past. And we sort of questioned them, and they sort of came up with a few excuses, and I thought, oh, well, look, we'll let this go. But Alan, what they've done, they've had another go. So they've adjusted the temperatures, and then they've gone and adjusted the adjusted temperatures again back in 2018. Now, I just find this unbelievable that you'll continue to make these adjustments. We continue to cool the past. And that day that you talk about, that they cooled going back to the 8th of March 1924, it wasn't just a slight adjustment, they've actually cooled the temperatures over 3 degrees Fahrenheit on the old scale. That is a massive adjustment that has taken away that record, and basically, the people that recorded that data, they must be rolling in their graves to think that those meticulous efforts they went to record our history had been changed 96 years down the track.
But Craig, just to speak in simple lingo, on many occasions the Bureau have said, oh, look, we've adjusted them because we went to neighbouring stations, neighbouring temperature stations. That was their word, neighbouring. Am I right in saying some of those neighbouring stations were 700 kilometres away?
That's right. You couldn't make this up, Alan. And what's the guarantee that these so-called neighbouring stations, 700 kilometres away, firstly, what's the guarantee that their data was right? Yes. And who's to say there wasn't slight variations in temperatures between two cities or two towns back then, 700 kilometres away?
So, I mean, this has been raised. I note that when your colleague, Dr. Mara Hassi, because she's been dealing with this as well, Jennifer, has done wonderful work, and she was in contact with the Manager of Climate Monitoring and Prediction at the Australian Bureau of Meteorology, a fellow called Dr. David Jones, who wrote in an email of September 7, 2007, 13 years ago, to Jennifer, truth be known, climate change here is now running so rampant, we don't need meteorological data to see it.
Alan, look, when you compare to what they've done in the United States as to what we have here in our records, it's just the record keeping has absolutely been terrible. They've pulled what is the large Stevenson screens out, replaced them with the smaller Stevenson screens, when it's known those smaller Stevenson screens measure hotter. Everything they've done to the records data and every change they make seems to put a warming bias into the records. Now, we're not saying that there's been no warming since the 1970s. Everyone understands that there's been some warming, but it's the rate of warming, Alan. Yes. And to go back in the past and to change these historic records without fully explaining it to the public about the reasons why this is done, just saying, look, we've just done it and the public's all too stupid to understand.
You're in government. What are your people doing about it? See, Graham, this is 94 years ago.
Well, I think that's the interesting question. What is the government doing about it? When I was a minister, the one thing I always insisted on with my departments was accuracy. You had to argue with the truth. You could never come in and exaggerate to win your position. So what does your government say about this?
Well, Richo, there's a couple of very good senators. Senator Rennick is working on this closely. He had the Bureau of Meteorology before Senate estimates early this week, Monday, here down in Canberra, and he's put some tough questions to them. He's put some more tough questions on notice. So we're waiting to see what excuses they come up to explain this. Because also, they had a page on their website. This was actually a page they had called Climate Education, and they set out all the details of the Marble Bar record. And the National Archives thought this was so important, they actually archived that web page. You go to the web today, that web page is missing. Yeah, but saying that web page that was there, I think it's up on the screen now.
Yes. Yeah.
You can see that was a page that the Bureau of Meteorology had previously produced called Climate Education. They had that published on their website that every Australian could read. And, you know, over the last couple of years, it's quietly disappeared.
Yes. See, Craig, just keep this really simple. What we're arguing tonight here, that we're going way back 94 years ago. Now, 94 years ago, Australia was barely industrialised. You couldn't say there was carbon dioxide everywhere. 94 years ago, and yet there were temperatures over all those continuous days over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And so suddenly now, someone's decided to bring these things up to date. No one knows how you bring them up to date. Equally, no one knows how you could possibly have sufficient scholarship to invalidate those records of 94 years ago. Now, you're in government. Who's the minister? Why is the minister turning a blind eye to this, or is the minister frightened to confront this truth?
Well, we've put through the Senate estimates and through some of the committees a lot of questions to the Bureau of Meteorology. When we get those answers back, we'll be taking it to the minister, and there'll be a lot of us in the party room demanding a full inquiry on this, because it's just not good enough that our history is rewritten this way.
But hang on,
it
when they tried,
our nation's history.
Hang on, when in the House of Representatives they tried to stop you from speaking about this, and they succeeded in stopping you, where were your own colleagues in government rising up? They've got the numbers, rising up in indignation and saying, hang on, this man will be heard.
Alan, look, they actually did, and I give credit to my good mate George Christensen, the member for Dawson. He actually stood up and tried to move an extension of time so I could continue to speak. But unfortunately, he'd moved that a minute too late, and that was a tactic by the Labor Party that shut me down, Alan.
So,
well, I'm disappointed if that's the case, because the one thing we need here is not partisan stuff. We actually need the truth.
Well, the key issue here, and we should have made this point earlier, and that is this, isn't it, Craig? The IPCC, this discredited IPCC, draws its conclusions from these climate models. So if you review the statistics and revise them, the IPCC then has the ammunition it needs to come to the conclusions that this is hotter than it's ever before, the planet's warming up because of industrialisation and carbon dioxide. That is the real issue here. So these revised models will now be used by the IPCC.
Correct, Alan, and the same thing is happening in the United States as well. The only places that really had accurate temperature records over broad geographical areas back in the 1920s and 1910s were Australia, the US and a little bit in Europe. The United States record has also been adjusted as where the past has been cooled. The Australian record has also been adjusted. So there's been many people that have studied this, many very wise professors that have looked at this, and they basically said any data before the 1970s is absolute junk as to trying to make any valid conclusions from.
Well, at the end of the day, I think we pay this mob, don't we? The Bureau of Meteorology, the budget appropriates to them about $1 million, how much? $1 million a day?
$1 billion.
Yeah.
You said something like that, Alan, yes.
Yeah. I think it's $1 million a day this mob get to put the past, sink it down a memory hole. Right? That's basically it.
All we're asking is for all that data to be made transparent. Let them publish all the reasons for these changes and let people study and peer review it. And if it's right and it stacks up, fair enough. But at the moment, a lot of this, what we call parallel data, simply isn't there. The reasons for the adjustment to Marble Bar are a mystery to anyone. Why one day back in 1924, how you could work out it should be 3 degrees Fahrenheit cooler back in 1924 than what the actual recordings were is simply beyond me.
Absolutely.
No, I don't,
And this is what we need to
you
try and
can't
get to
tell
the
me
bottom of.
that you worked that out on the basis of proper scholarship.
But the
That's
issue,
rubbish.
the political issue here is, Graham, where is the government on this? And that's Craig's own
Missing.
party. Where is the government on this? That's Craig's own party. Craig, thank you for the work you do. Thank you for the work you do.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Richo.
It's quite outstanding. So there we are.
It's terrific.
So it is. So you put the past down a memory hole. Bang. But where is the government saying, well, this you can't? Because these records then go to the IPCC.
That's
and they
right.
say, we've got a justification now.
And so it all just goes around
just
in this circle.
Well, there you are.
No one breaks it.
Right? What was that? What was that? What are you doing there?
You like that, did you? I can do that. Yeah.
Can you?